Oh, there we go. We're live yet again for the next day of 10 days with the Church Fathers. So just give a second while I am sharing the Facebook feed and letting people know that we're live. So here we go. Sharing to all the different places. And let's see. Give me just a second. And there we go. Okay. And live yet again. We're going live over days leading up to Christmas, starting yesterday. And we'll culminate in next Friday, 10 days with the Church Fathers. And every day at noon Atlantic time, 11 Pacific time, 11 Eastern time, and 8 Pacific time. Good to see Jim. Good to see you on. And we're spending some time with the Church Fathers and the thoughts of the fathers as they pertain to the incarnation of Christ. Why the incarnation? Because we're moving into the incarnation season. And we're right in the middle of anticipating his birth, which is typified in the incarnation. And so yesterday we were talking about the union of divine and human in the womb of Mary, that he created he initiated a new form of birth, and then the impact on humanity is that we're all invited, as we participate in him by grace and faith, we're all invited to participate in the same new form of birth, which is a spiritual union with the Spirit of God. And so we're just looking at layers and depth as it pertains to the incarnation. And I have found the writings of the early church fathers in specifically as it pertains to the nature of Jesus, just absolutely fascinating. Everywhere from reading Athanasius and Augustine as they were working through Trinitarian theology and the nature of Jesus, looking at the Cappadocian fathers, Gregory of Nyssa, Basil the Great, Gregory Nazianzen, and how they were working through Trinitarian language, and then looking at Leo the Great, Cyril of Alexandria, and how they were wrestling through all of the concepts of not just the Trinity. I mean, the Trinity is one concept that we wrestle with, the three in one God that's a mystery, and how do you explain that? But specifically the taking on of humanity that we see in the incarnation. And I find that one of the reasons that we're doing this is I find that in typical evangelical theology is we tend to centralize our concepts about Jesus around the virgin birth and around the all that transpired at the cross. And that's kind of, if we're to present the gospel, those are kind of the two core elements that we'd include in the gospel. And those are good. By no means would I say those are bad places to fix our understanding of the gospel. But there's layers and depth that we fail to appreciate when that's that's our sticking point. And the actual incarnation, just the very fact of the incarnation itself, has vast ramifications for humanity, which we're going to see a little bit about today. Actually, every day we'll see peering into the vast ramifications to humanity, and understanding. That the it's great to see Lorraine jumping on. Sarah, awesome to see you. So if you're jumping on, please take a second and share the Facebook video, the YouTube video. Give us a like, a comment. Let us know that you're there. That's always wonderful. And we'll be going. Let people know that we're going live every day over the next 8 more days after this one. Although we'll take the weekend off. So and just in looking at how the early church appreciated that, I have found a lot of life and impact when it comes to the early church writing. Some of you who follow our podcast, Voices from the Desert, would see we've been on a long series just looking at how the early church made space for revelation and how that impacted the very fabric of the early church, um, and how they wrote about that, and how they thought about that, and how they appreciated that, and so we've been talking about that on the Voices from the Desert podcast, and then how we're to understand that in a contemporary church setting. Does it have any impact to us today? So great to see Bobby jumping on. Love seeing everybody on there. So what we're doing is we're going through a contemplative journey, looking at how two specific church fathers who wrote kind of at the end of the patristic age, and they're really good at giving us a summation of what constituted um, the kind of the crystallization of the Christological argument. Well, I guess we could say that. That sounds fun to say. Um, where we get to Maximus the Confessor and Leo the Great, two guys that were part of the last really let's clarify these things, and they're coming down to where the theological nuances are about the divine human union within Christ, and then that's with Leo, and then with Maximus, it's the human and divine will within Christ. And does he have one will? Does he have two wills? And there's still some parsing out that people do. I have my eggnog latte from a local coffee shop, so we're just firing on all cylinders. So I wrote a little contemplative journey through the church fathers last year, and our church used it to go through what are some of the thoughts that the early church fathers would pull on. And so you can find the PDF of this is in there's a link to download that in the description of the video. And if we have about we have while supplies last anyway, if you want to make a donation to the ministry, we'll send you a free copy of this for any donation amount. So we have some laying around still from last year's Christmas journey. And so I like I said, I love going through this stuff, and it's my heart to share it with you guys that you might be fascinated with the depth that the church fathers bring to the table when it comes to examining the nature of Jesus. And I've said, those of you that have read my transformation book, at a number of on our live streams, that transformation begins in catching a glimpse of the beauty of God. It begins in catching a glimpse, it's sustained by catching a glimpse, and it actually culminates in catching a glimpse of his beauty. And when we look at the nature of Jesus, there's one layer of catching a glimpse of his beauty, what the impact is upon humanity. It's interesting trying to describe beauty. The way that you describe beauty isn't so much how beautiful the thing is, but you describe beauty based on its impact upon you. So when we look at Jesus and we try and describe how beautiful he is, what I can tell you about isn't so much what he looks like. What I can tell you about is how he impacts me. So when we're peering into the divine nature and we're trying to come to grips with the incarnation, what I have to come to grips with is how that impacts my humanity. And it absolutely does impact my humanity. And so that's what we're looking at. So we're on day 2 of this contemplative journey into the incarnation with the church fathers. And so we've got a quote from Maximus the Confessor, some thoughts. Great to see Karen jumping in all the way from over in BC. I was just actually over in British Columbia a few days ago. Spent 4 or 5 days with plotting and planning the future and training, talking about training leaders and encountering the Spirit and all that kind of stuff. So came back very encouraged from my trip to British Columbia, and very happy that I have an eggnog latte, because you can't get those at Starbucks anymore. Apparently, I went to get one for my wife the other day, and they've retired them. So you got to take the local coffee shop version, which is probably better. Anyway, so we're getting into Maximus the Confessor, and he said this. Hey, day 2, Maximus the Confessor said this. Again, you can get the PDF and follow along on the PDF, or just do it at your own time. And if you want to make a donation to the ministry of any amount, we'll send you a copy of it. But the link right there is in the description. There's a couple other links in the description I'll tell you about in a little bit too. So we're calling today the Incarnation and the Desire of God. Maximus the Confessor said this: Out of his infinite longing for human beings, he has become truly and according to nature the very thing for which he longed. So I'll read that again. Out of his infinite longing for human beings, he has become truly and according to nature the very thing for which he longed. And see, so what Maximus is saying is it was out of his great desire for human beings that he became human himself. Not because he had need of humanity, not because he was lacking something or missing anything. It's because he so longed for humanity, the ones that he had created. Out of his great desire, he became what he desired. I just want to read you this little excerpt from the contemplative journey. It's a little paragraph I wrote in regards to that. And it says this: the limitless and transcendent holy God made himself what he had made. He took on the very nature of that which he longed for in order to bring that which he longed for into his nature. The incarnation does not come out of a need in the Godhead, but it was necessary for humanity. And as a result of his longing, you have entered into the pleasure of his presence. One of the things that we have to recognize, there's this kind of narrative that goes on in Christianity, and it's not really derived from the Bible. It's kind of a hodgepodge of things put together, but it's that we are, as humans, we're horrible, evil, awful things, and our flesh is something that we wrestle with. And as we wrestle with it because it's sinful and it's corrupt and it's decayed. And there's I'm not saying there's not an aspect of truth to that. We all know that we've wrestled with our own flesh. But I mean, Paul describes this wrestle in Romans 7 quite uh explicitly. I do what I don't want to do. I don't do what I want to do. I tried to not covet. I couldn't help myself and began coveting. The law comes in and shows me my sinfulness. So we know that there's an aspect of that wrestle that is germane to humanity. But when we peel back all the layers and we go back right to the very get-go in Genesis 1 and 2, the story and narrative of creation. We see in the narrative of creation a number of times, actually after every single day, God saying that creation was good. Now, if we understand the sometimes we read Genesis 1 and 2 from a kind of a contemporary scientific standpoint and try and investigate the steps and order of creation, going, okay, well, he made, like, you can go from he made this to be built on this, to be built on this. So we look at it and how many years would this take? I remember reading or researching some of this stuff years ago and looking at the young Earth and old Earth theories, and how one young Earth theory is that the flood redeposited the sedimentary layers of the Earth, so that the Earth appears to be 6,000, or it appears to be billions of years old, but is actually only 6,000 years old. And if they had a worldwide flood, it would significantly redistribute basically fossil layers and all that kind of stuff. A really interesting theory. And I don't know if you can prove any of those things without beyond a shadow of a doubt. But the thing is, what we try and do is we try and look at Genesis 1 and 2 and understand the scientific aspect of creation, reading through a 21st century lens, what a um author, what, 3,800 years ago or so, was trying to communicate, in Moses, when he wrote Genesis 1, 2, and 3. So to understand Genesis 1, 2, and 3, we can't read it from a contemporary scientific lens. We have to think about it in light of Moses 3,800 years ago. What was Moses intending to convey in the story of Genesis in the creation? And Moses is writing, and this is germane to Maximus's point, so bear with me. Moses is writing in a day and an age when the mythology of gods basically said, in every creation mythos, that creation was an act of destruction and chaotic formation by a fight in the heavenlies with a in a pantheon of gods, and the thing that ushered forth was the result of the terror and chaos that happened because all these gods were fighting. That's essentially what constitutes the pagan mythos of the day, when it comes to all of the cultures that Moses was engaging with. And so when Moses says that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and he describes this creation process that is ordered and reasonable, and that after every day he says God looked on his creation and saw that it was good. What Moses is doing in that is one, he's obviously conveying something that the Father showed him, right? Moses wasn't there for creation unless God took him back. I guess God took him to see Jesus. He could have taken him back to see creation. But what Moses is what we have to understand Moses describing in the context of his culture is God God is different than every other creation story. And so he's writing going, look, the stuff that you've heard in other religions, God's not like that, or other belief systems or practices, the pagan stuff. God's not like that. This is what he's like. So when he says, let us make man in our image, he's talking about actually a united heavenly assembly, not a chaotic, divided heavenly assembly. He's talking about a united one. Let us make man in our image. And there's, maybe there's an aspect of Trinitarian language in there. Some people hypothesize that. I know some people hypothesize the Council of the Gods. You can reference Michael Heiser with that. But regardless of what it is, when it says "Let us make man in our image," it's a picture of a God working in unison, not a God working in conflict with other beings. And yeah, Sarah says in some cultures their gods almost died a gruesome and horrible death. That's so true. And so when Moses lays this out and he says, we've got a good God who loves his creation and who longs to be in his creation, and he places his image in his creation, which is mankind. He makes man in his image and then puts man in his creation. And this is also actually classic temple language. When you had a temple, you would put the image of the god in the temple, and that would signify that the god inhabited that temple. So we've got a narrative, and we even have creation separated into three distinct. Um, you've got the heavens above, the firmament, and the heavens below, or the waters above, the firmament, and the waters below. So we've got three areas here, which would seem to be a direct reference to the Jewish temple, where you had the outer court, the inner court, and the holy of holies. So we see these layers upon layers upon layers of meaning in that, and so when you see the final culmination in Genesis 1 and 2, where he takes man, places him in the garden, and places his likeness on the earth, and says, "Be fruitful and multiply." And then the very last thing he says about creation before everything goes awry is, "And he looked on it, and it was very good." Now, he didn't say it was very good until after his image was placed in it. So, what we have to understand is that God wasn't looking at humans going, "You stupid, wicked things, you screwed it all up." He was looking at humans as the outgrowth of his passion to recreate himself and to show what he was like. So, human beings in his image, in his likeness, are God's great passion and God's great glory and God's great love. So, when he says, "I'm now going to make myself what I've made," as you saw written in there, this is a ringing endorsement of your humanity. He's saying, "I love humanity." And when it says, we'll get into this in a later day, but when it says that that Christ was the one who took on human flesh, that term does not simply mean a human body. It's actually the word for he took on what it means to be human. He took on what it means to be human because he loves humanity. He loves creation. And this is John 3:16. Actually, that's the scripture reading for this day in the contemplative journey. For God so loved the world. We could just pause right there. God so loved. Not God was so despising of the world that he had to save it from its own wickedness. We see God so loved, and that's the catalyst for the incarnation, is God loving and giving. That's the catalyst for the incarnation. So it's out of his great desire and out of his great affection for humanity that he took on humanity. And so that should say that when he looks at you, that what we have to see, a biblical perspective seen from the lens of the patristics, is a, is a God who longs for and loves his creation and the human beings that occupy his creation. That those human beings would be um, the catalyst for the world knowing the glory of the Father. And that's why, when you look at the early church, some of the great miracle stories aren't so much the miraculous power of God, though there's a lot of that, but some of the great miracle stories are how the poor were fed, how the sick were taken care of. I'm thinking of one great uh, desert father named Pachomius, who was a disciple of Anthony the Great, and how he was serving in the Roman army. And when he went, and in the city that they were staying, the conditions for the army were very poor, and the Christians came and took care of the army. The occupying Roman army. They took care of them, fed them, clothed them, because they were getting sick and in danger of dying. And so the Christian witness to Pachomius, he resolved at that moment that whenever he was out of the Roman service, he was going to go to the first church he could find and dedicate his life to Jesus. And so the witness of Christian compassion is like thoroughly throughout uh, the early church age. There's miraculous stories of God's intervention and all that, for sure, of course. But the image of God as the tender, caring, loving God who's come into his creation to make things right, to restore humanity, to restore the image of God in humanity. That image was one of, like it says, of Macarius the Great, another desert father, uh, that uh, let's just looking at, he took on flesh as in also the human experience. Yeah, joy, grief. Yeah, exactly. That's right. We would never be alone in any of those things. That's right. Um, so what was I saying? Lost my train of thought there. Um, oh yeah, Macarius the Great, it was said of him that he became a god on earth because, like God on earth, he covered the faults of others, and as though he did not even see them. And so the image, as we can see in the patristic age, the image wasn't that man would do great miracles. Again, though that happens, and there's lots of stories of that, the image of God is the tender, loving kindness that was demonstrated in the life of Jesus. And again, it's a ringing endorsement of the beauty of humanity from the eyes of God, to look like him and be in the world representing who he is to the people that don't know him yet, through acts of mercy, through acts of compassion. So that's the thought of Maximus the Confessor, is God, the incarnation is a result of the desire and affection God has for human beings. Not, I got to save them out of this mess because they're so screwed up and wicked. Like, you don't, I like, yeah, human beings are screwed up and wicked. We just look at human history and figure that out. I mean, human beings, as genius and beautiful as human beings can be, we also invented the atomic bomb. And I mean, it's like we have a propensity to wickedness. Like we don't need anybody to tell us that. It's obvious if you look at human history. Um, and you just look at divorce rates, you look at suicide rates, you look at the single family or single parent household rates, and how that the crime rates skyrocketing. You just look at all that stuff. You can see, like, yeah, human beings have a problem. But it wasn't God going, well, they're wicked, and so I've come to judge them. It was God going, I love them so much that I want to come and be with them. So he took on flesh and experienced all it meant to be human, in order to, well, we're going to talk about this later, but in order to redeem all that it meant to be human. But that'll be a thought for another day. So that's the thought for today. God's great desire and affection is what drove the incarnation for humanity. His great desire and affection for humanity is what drove, like, you think about, just one last thought, I guess, you think about in Song of Solomon, chapter 5, I think it's chapter 4, chapter 5, the when the Shulamite bride finally comes to grips with her bridalness before Solomon. She's his throne and all of this. Solomon describes what the bride looks like to him, and it's like she's beautiful beyond anything I've ever seen. And that, that we typify in Christian history as the way that the Father sees the church and the individual Christian. When I see you, essentially looking at Song of Solomon, when I see you through the eyes of perfect beauty and perfect love. It's interesting, when there was a long standing study done by somewhere, Harvard maybe, um, and the happiness study, I think it's called, started about 70 years ago, and they've tracked the metrics for happiness and success in men in particular. And I think eventually they brought women into it, but it started with men. And it's fascinating that one of the most significant indicators of happiness and contentment later on in life is not earning income. It's not money, it's not possessions or anything, but it's meaningful relationships. Deep and meaningful relationships are actually what lead people to a sense of fulfillment later on in life. It's interesting when you think about the nature of humanity, God's great love for humanity, that our need for a deep and meaningful relationship where we're seen and known and loved is actually what leads to human flourishing and success and a sense of fulfillment later on in life. It's almost like he wired us for him. And we see, I think church fathers thought that way. Maximus especially, going, his desire for human beings is why he became one, so that he could bring them into himself, back into himself. So it's his love and affection that drives the incarnation. Okay, so those are my thoughts there today. We've got a couple things to share before we call this day of reflections to a close. Um, yeah, you think that way, Sarah. That's right. So we've just put out 2 new resources. So again, you can download the PDF booklet in the description of of this video. You could donate any amount. We'll ship you a free copy of it as well. Um, and then on top of that, we've just released, I talked about it yesterday, I just got it in. It's just the promotional one. We're still waiting for the actual shipment to come, of the new look at this thing, the new Silent Fire collection. This is all the writings, the devotional, the Desert Fathers, and recreating the principles of desert monasticism and looking at them and saying, how do we incorporate those in a contemporary way? And looking at 10 of the major figures from the desert movement and going, what was the core elements of their teaching, and how do we think about those today? How do they impact our Christian life? How do they impact our community, our communal life, and the churches we attend? And it's only available right now on Amazon, Sarah. So you've got to go to, and there's a link to Amazon.com. You can find it on Amazon.ca as well. In any place Amazon exists, it should be there. So you see this Amazon's promotional copy. It says not for resale there. But so we wrote a introduction that gives context for the desert, and then the other major difference. So that's a big difference. The other major difference is we have a bios now for each one of the fathers. So we've got Gregory the Great, and biography for Gregory talking about his life. So we've expanded it, and put it all together in one collection. And now it's designed, it's a coffee table book. So you put it on your coffee table right there, and it lays flat, and you can just contemplate and read and experience the Father. So that is available on Amazon. We will have it available on our website pretty soon here. Just depends on when the shipment arrives of the printed copies. So you can go to Amazon. So the link in the video description, Amazon.com, you can find it there. Amazon.ca or anywhere else. Also, you just search for it there. I just put the Amazon.com link. The other thing is, we've just released a brand new course called Wisdom from the Patristics. And that link is also in the video description. The Wisdom from the Patristics is looking at the early church age and how they made space for revelation and the practice of spiritual gifts within within uh, the fabric of church life. And so that there's 35 lessons, there's readings, there's videos. It's all pre-recorded. We've been hard at work recording videos, editing older videos, bringing everything together so that all the content when you register is available to you all at once. You can go at your own pace. So it's all there for you though to go at your own pace. And we've provided there's a journal that you can download to follow along with questions and exercises, quotes, and all that kind of stuff to get you thinking and follow along with the show notes as well. Um, so that is there in the video description. Wisdom from the patristics. How did the early church fathers make space for this practice of the spiritual gifts, prophetic ministry, healing ministry, and what did they think about those things? Looking at probably about the first 600 years of church history and how they approached that. So that I would encourage you to take a look at that one. And I think there's a couple preview videos you can see when you click on the link to the Wisdom from the Patristics course. So I'm really excited about that one. I love that stuff. And I know a number of you who follow what we're doing really love that stuff as well. So with that, we'll call this video to a close for the day. And I will see you tomorrow with our next thought. And I think we're moving on to Leo the Great. And the topic is the assumption of humanity was the cause of redemption. And that is the topic for tomorrow. So everybody, thanks for jumping on. Thanks for your comments. It's awesome to see everybody here. And download the PDF. If you want a copy, donate, visit Amazon, order the Silent Fire collection, and take a look at the Wisdom from the Patristics. And if that intrigues you, sign up for it. So we just love resourcing the body of Christ to experience the goodness and the kindness and the tenderness of the Father. And so thanks everybody for tuning in, and I will see you tomorrow at the same time, 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern. So bye.